This Week in 40K.
Welcome to This Week in 40K, the show about the grimdark that is neither grim nor dark. I've got Billy here with me, as I always do. Billy, how you doing?
I am doing wonderfully, although not as snazzily dressed as you are, I have to say.
Yeah, new work is early. So I had a meeting this morning with a Canadian electrical distributor. That's what I've been doing this morning. So, yeah, it's been a... What's that, Billy?
I also occasionally have meetings with Canadian electrical distributors in my job, which I'm on paternity leave from, which is delightful. I highly
you don't miss
recommend
working?
No.
Not at all?
Oh, there are parts of it that I miss, but I don't miss working and moving and having a newborn. Pick two.
Okay.
And the newborn isn't going anywhere.
Well, you already moved. I don't think.
Yeah, but again,
I don't think there's much more complaining to do about moving.
Well, no, there is, because when you have a newborn, you only can unpack for about an hour at a time, and that means that you're still unpacking almost 2 weeks in.
Okay, well, that does sound miserable.
Yeah, but
so what have you been doing that's 40K related?
I had the first time ever in my life someone came to my house and played 40K, because I now have a house that can accommodate that. And that part of it was delightful. Playing the big bug demon list into an reasonably optimized Eldar list, not so much fun, but it was a good time and learnings were had. And, you know, there will be a running theme, I would imagine, in this episode about the state of balance in the game. And I had the pineapple. I was the receiver in this one.
Okay. I actually played a game on Saturday with Chuck. Mm-hmm. And we played Tyranids into Orcs.
Oh, yeah.
So no Eldar, no Desolation Marines, no Knights, you know. Just, I've got stuff, you've got stuff, let's play a game. And it was wonderful. It was so interesting. And 10th edition really helped us and made it fun. We had move blocking and close combat and pile-in shenanigans and all types of stuff that ended up with like a 2-point or 3-point game in Chuck's favor. Like, just a wonderful game. And what it made me realize is we have these outliers, right, on both ends. But the game at its core is still fun. We just need some balance on these outliers. And with that,
well, actually, let me just finish on that. Just because the other thing that I'm doing to that same point is just sort of deciding to live in that middle. And I've been hobbying up Black Templar right now. And let me tell you, Impulsors and Storm Speeders are finicky models.
To hobby, you mean?
Yeah, just to put together. There are a lot of pieces in those guys.
Interesting. I recently had to put together both Warwalkers and Vipers. Mm-hmm. And both of those kits are, in fact, older than one Tyler Bortel by a reasonable metric.
Yeah.
Their instructions are one picture in black and white with no numbers or any sort of anything on them. It's from one angle, and if you can't see the piece you want to put together from that angle, well, then that's on you. Shockingly bad, and surprising how far they've come to the new Tyranid and Space Marines mock set where everything's push fit. Yeah. Pretty big journey from one of those to the other.
The irony being those are two of what I would consider the newer parts of the Eldari line.
Well, we just had a bunch of kit refreshes. Anyways, let's move on. Here we go.
Yes.
Our top story.
This is the part of the episode where I ask Billy, what's our top story?
Our top story is that 10th edition is in full swing, and I feel fine, mostly as a reference to the great band REM. But no, I think it's to Colin's point. The middle is great. When we get into the events, there's going to be some very funny results to read, is the way that I'm choosing to pitch it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was hoping that we were getting I don't know what to call it. There's going to be one more scheduled set of GW changes to 10th that's coming. There were reasons to believe it was coming this morning. As of me saying these words, it is not posted on the Warhammer community site. But if it
I would
is,
guess at least an hour. I would guess it won't come until the end of our show at the earliest, if it's today.
Yeah.
But basically what they said is this, I think this document is a correction to rules.
Yes.
They didn't make it sound like this document was going to balance anything. However, there are things that need to be clarified in the rules that will nerf things. There's things like Genestealer Cult's got rules that are obscure and strange that we're making interpretations on. And if those all got interpreted in the other direction, that would affect Genestealer Cult. So like there is opportunity for balance, but I don't think we should go into it presuming or craving balance.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's codifying the rulings that were used at Tacoma, which is, an official GW event, so they would have access to that information. And from everything I've heard, they all sound like good changes in the right direction. I do think that, neither Grim nor Dark on this show, I think we have an obligation to be honest that keeping this meta going for another 6 weeks would be an interesting choice by GW.
Yeah, it's really not great. And I think that the tournament results we're going to look at, like if you remove one or so outliers from the top 10 of each tournament, the other 9 lists are exactly what we think the S tier is.
Yeah.
If we look at a tournament and the top results are all Eldari, GSC, Eldari and GSC and
You're gonna say Custodes?
Imperial Knights.
Nice.
I was going to say Knights. Then yes, those armies are too good, and I think that they are. We can look at win rates. The thing that really surprises me is that Custodes did so well out here at Tacoma, and we're not seeing them at anywhere else. Which makes me wonder if it's GW train or there just aren't good Custodes players for the rest of the country. But I think that's unlikely.
I would actually guess that a lot of these events had list locks before the results from Tacoma came out, and because no one was really talking about Custodes, people are not trying them immediately. They're trying the other things. I know, and we might get to this, we might not, that you're working on an Eldar list that I bet actually has a much better game into Custodes than.
Oh yeah, I for sure am.
So
at the very least, in my meta, I'm going to be able to deal with Custodes, even if everybody else doesn't need to.
Right. So,
go ahead.
No, I think that Eldar have the tools to, if not leaf blower, whatever you can do functionally equivalent of leaf blower in Custodes, and that will keep them from rising to the top.
See, I think that matchup is completely on a teeter. I think that Custodes versus Eldar is an incredibly close game. I don't think that Eldar have any ability to shoot them easily off the table. The fact that they have a lot of what Eldar players are doing is mortal wounds, which is awful against Custodes. And then the whole army has a 2-up, and then they stand in cover, and now shuriken cannons don't work. And then you're shooting your bright lances and your D cannons or your Wraith Knight at them, and you're hoping they don't make 4-up invuls. It is much worse than the Eldar is going to keep Custodes in check, in my opinion.
Depending on the builds of Eldar, because this is going into what we're going to talk about later when we get to results. The second or third tier of Eldar units, like there's a build that's just like 40 Bright Lance shots on top of other things. And that is actually, I think, one of the things I actually do want to talk about is your wonderful OG episode last weekend. And there were a few really good pieces of learning that I thought came out of that. And one of them was Hank talking about, what actually kills me. Well, mass 4 damage attacks. And you guys all had a good laugh at him. Like, thanks, Hank. There's a ton of massive 4 damage attacks. Well,
I'll just take my tank that shoots 10 4 damage shots at him. No, that's not right.
Except for that, like, Eldar can sort of just overload on Bright Lances, which kind of functionally become mass 4 damage shots. So there's stuff like that. I also just at least one other thing that immediately comes to mind was Chuck talking about how he used pigs bases to do pile-ins and thereby make combat actually work by preventing him from going where he didn't want to. And you saying you hadn't realized that, I thought that was a really important.
Yeah, so basically what he's doing is, if you imagine that his unit that he's charging is in a ball, what he's doing is he's charging the first pig all the way around to where he wants the edge of his pylon to be. I know this is not going to be visible for people on the podcast, but because the base is so long, when the other ones try to come in to measure, they don't have the distance to get all the way around and base,
Right.
which means they can't base.
Right.
Which means you can pile everybody in that small area because you walled yourself in on the side with those big bases. I think that's a really, really, really smart thing that I just hadn't occurred to me. It's certainly not as easy if you're dealing with 28 or 32 millimeter bases, but it worked really well for the Squig Hog Rider bases.
Yeah. So just like I said, I think there is good and interesting learning from that episode. Go listen to it. It's long. So I hope you have
It is really long. Yeah, he's talking about the Best in Faction episode from Sunday. You can find it on our YouTube. It's going up on our podcast feed today.
Yeah. So that is what I would consider our top story, a long rambling discussion about the generic state of 10th edition.
Yeah, let's move on to what's winning, because it's the same thing.
What's new?
Oh, what's new?
What's new?
Okay, what's new?
What's new is that a lot of Marines units are getting legended. This came out yesterday on Warhammer Community. I had been commenting to some people that, boy, it looks like something like 70% of the Marine line is out of stock on GW's website and has been for a few weeks. And that's because a decent amount of it is going away. They were very clear that they are not squatting Firstborn Marines. You will still be able to use Firstborn Marines, just not all of them. A lot of the really old kits, like the bikes, they said use them as outriders in the future if you want to, but they're not making new ones. Scouts are going away. Regular librarians are apparently going away. Some dreadnoughts. Quite a few of the more than a Bortel old models, just they're no longer going to be making them. They did say that they're going to be a decent amount of new minis coming with the Space Marine Codex, which is probably sometime in September based on the roadmap they've given us. But, go through that article just to take a look at what is going away and make your hobby and financial decisions based upon that.
Yeah, I know about that it's happening, but I actually haven't looked through the list and seen how painful it is yet. I'm still recovering from the Damicarons being legended, the newest Forge World Tyranid kit that everybody bought at the beginning of 9th edition and spent a ton of money on. And a mere 2 years later, they're like, no, screw you guys. So there's been some of that I think is just annoying. So I haven't looked at the Space Marine list, but I will.
Here, let me read through it. Attack bikes, Bike Squad, Scout bikes, Land Speeder Storm, Stalker Hunter, which is the anti-aircraft thing, Ironclad Dreadnought, Assault Squad, Company Command, Scouts with sniper rifles, Librarian, Tech Marine with Servitors, Thunderfire Cannon. The last one I don't think anyone will shed a tear for. I'm a little surprised at Assault Squads. They said they just are going to become Vanguard vets. I'm personally hoping for Primaris Assault Marines with jump packs, which I've wanted for...
What the hell is going on with attack bikes?
Because an attack bike is basically an old school bike with just a little piece sitting on the side of it. I assume they don't want to keep the main mold of the bike to keep the attack bikes. You have the Invader ATV is the replacement.
I could punch you right now.
That would take some very interesting work through space and time, but
I have a lot of attack bikes.
Yeah.
More than I can legally take currently.
I bet you what. So they do have an article or a line in here specifically about bikes. So the storied bike squad that has served you and the Emperor for 20 years could stay in your army using the rules for Outriders. I bet you they will say you can use attack bikes as Invader ATVs. And maybe that'll be a good data sheet.
What a weird, but you can't. The weaponry is completely different. How could you use attack bikes for that? Doesn't make any sense.
Attack bikes can have either like the Gatling cannon or a multi-melter, right? So
They can have a heavy bolter or a multi-melta. Those are
sorry, attack bikes. Yeah, attack bikes have that. And the Invader ATV has the Gatling cannon or a multi-melta. Everyone put multi-meltas on them anyway. You have a multi-melta.
Okay. Well, I'm a little bit sad, but I'll be okay. I'll survive.
I found myself completely whelmed by the change, and mostly because it meant I didn't have to try to figure out how to buy 10 Scout Snipers.
Have we talked about how great the new Tyranid models are?
I give you the floor.
Yeah, I just am blown away. So a bunch more Tyranid models were previewed, and honestly, they might have been before last week. No, they were during the Tacoma Open, and we didn't have a chance, and we didn't talk about them last week.
Okay.
Because we were so busy talking about the Tacoma Open. But they, when they do codexes, they're trying, it's obvious over the last year or two, they're trying to redo portions of the model line. Eldar got some new models, and then they got a codex. And now it's Tyranid's turn to get new models, and they're incredible. There is a thing called the Norn Emissary that is just crazy cool looking. It is really neat. I'm excited to see how big it actually is, but it looks like it's almost Demacaron sized. So what were you going to say, Billy?
They showed it next to a Wraith Lord, which is the Dreadnought one, and it was probably an inch or so bigger. But yeah, I completely agree. That miniature alone made me like, ooh, I sold my halves of the Leviathan box. Oh, well. But I thought about it.
Yeah, I think that everybody, if you haven't gone to Warhammer Community and looked at the models, you should. There's a mixture of cool and silly. But silly's you have to kind of embrace silly if you play Tyranids, because there's always models that are dumb that you're playing with anyways. I don't think the new Biovore models are particularly attractive, just as an example.
I do, but my aesthetic I also think Desolation Marines look cool. So, my mileage may vary. And
on that bombshell, let's move on to what's winning.
No, there's the Meta Watch from Tacoma, which I need to just cover for 1 minute.
All right, go ahead.
There was a Meta Watch from Tacoma. It was Stu, the head of the design studio, and Paul Murphy talking with each other. A little bit more of a fluff piece than most Meta Watches, which says something. But they did identify that, they see the outliers. And they're, as much as they ever say they're going to address them, they suggest they're going to address them both on the top end and the bottom end. And they called out all of the factions that you would expect at both the top and the bottom. So they're not blind to it. We'll have to hold them to account to see what they do with it. But there was a discussion at Tacoma about it. Custodes sort of got these guys won, and weren't necessarily put on the watch list, which potentially by what we see this week is accurate. We'll see if there's a bit of a lag there. But just wanted to flag that there was a Meta Watch. I watched it so you don't have to. That's the summary. Okay.
I know that they talked about Hank's army without mentioning him, which was weird. That's a weird choice that GW made, to not talk about the players that came up with the list and just talk about the lists. But okay.
They're still working on understanding the importance of personalities in building out a competitive scene and the benefits that has to their game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay. So I think that there is outliers on both ends, like they talked about. And what's interesting about the current meta is I think if you remove those outliers, the game is actually looking pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that there's a mixture of middle tier things that are all perfectly fine to play into each other, that aren't as upsetting, but it's the few things that people know to be upset about, right? Desolation Marines. Like Desolation Marines say, oh, you've brought a T3 Horde army like Tyranids, you lose. Oh, you're playing Orcs, you lose. And there's things like that are just backbreaking to the game. As someone who's played a bunch of Eldar, there's a lot of armies that just you show up on the table against Eldar and you're like, well, I don't have an option here. I'll just get shot off the table. And so I think that that's the problem, where you have these factions that just get obliterated against something from the S tier. Mm-hmm. And if we can resolve that, I think the game's looking pretty good. What I'm super interested in is the Tyranids Codex. I want to see what's the codex direction, and also when we get the first codex, which is Tyranids, will it be wildly overpowered? Will it be a situation where Tyranids immediately become the S tier, and we're all frustrated about
it? I agree with all of that. The one thing I would just comment in is, you think that we're going to get Nids before we get Marines?
Well, they said we are, right?
Did they? I did not see an ordering of those codexes, and I just always
on the picture, the Tyranids are above Marines.
Okay.
So I'm making a little bit of an assumption, but also we've seen the new Tyranid models and we haven't seen the new Marine models. So that alone,
there's a reason for that. No, the reason for that was with Leviathan, there was the battle for Ogma, whatever the planet that they were invading was, and there was a little slip of paper in your Leviathan box that you could say who won when I put the minis from this box against each other, and Nids won, so they got their minis previewed first. That's why they were previewed as opposed to Marines.
Why do you think that Marines are going to come out before Tyranids?
Because Marines always come out first.
Okay. Let's move on to what's winning. I have nothing but sadness to respond to that.
Here, let me just tell you why I'm curious about Marines, although it could function for Nids as well. Melee is in a bad place right now. Everyone agrees on that. That's a factually true statement. Both of those armies have the possibility. Okay, apparently, according to Robert Saxon Nodges, good name.
Who, as we know, is an official source.
Yes.
Sorry, Robert. I'm just teasing. I don't know you, but that was my understanding as well. Robert says they said Nids first for their codex.
If they did, then I missed it, and I'm perfectly happy to be wrong. But I think both of those armies are armies that can be melee armies, and I'm curious to see if they actually give some support for that above and beyond what they have now. That's my main curiosity on new codices.
I want to see how many detachments there are.
Yeah, that'll be
because I think that they've set up the detachments as a really interesting balance opportunity where you're like, okay, well, for Marines, okay, well, I lose doctrines, but I gain this.
Yeah.
Right now, they haven't done that well, right? The Space Wolf one is garbage, as an example. And so everyone's just taking the default Gladius task force. But if there were actually interesting choices in there, then what stratagems you have changes. And what they've shown in the Space Marine ones is that sometimes there's overlap stratagems with the Space Marine Gladius ones. But not always. Sometimes they're just different. And I think that that's a really interesting way to make armies feel different from each other. Because right now, one of the things I'm feeling super hard in my frustration with, I have frustrations with 40K. I have happiness as well, but I have frustrations. And one of the frustrations is I want to play Eldar, but literally the only thing Eldar do is shoot you.
Yeah, they do
literally.
Well. Yeah,
they shoot you very well. But when everybody's making these lists, they're picking which of the fast-moving, shoot really hard things they would like to take. And sometimes there's an avatar, and sometimes there's the incarn. But other than that, it's like, here's all the guns that I've brought. And I think that that's boring, and there's nothing else for me to do.
Yeah.
There's no other option that I can build and play differently. I could play Ynnari, and then I can soup in Drukhari into my shooting you really hard. But I'm only going to take the Drukhari things that are underpointed for what shooting they do. It's not like I'm going to soup in Drukhari and be like, finally, I can have witches with my Eldar who are bad and just as bad as the aspect warrior close combat that Eldar has it. So there's that. And then you look at the Tyranid army, and we're going to talk about a pretty high Tyranid finish. But I played Tyranids into Orcs with the best things I think exist in the Tyranid book. And I had a very close game with Orcs, but the whole time I'm thinking, I don't know what the hell I do against Custodes. Like the Alaris Terminators can just pick up any Tyranid unit and then charge it pick up any other Tyranid unit. Yeah. It's just hard because there isn't that variety.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't exist right now. Paul would like to know. Sorry, you go ahead and respond to what I was saying, Billy, and then we'll go to Paul's question.
Yeah, because I was going to transition to Paul too in a second. 2 points on that. One, yes, absolutely, we need to see what multiple detachments for a faction look like, because that they've clearly set themselves up for this is how we're going to flavor our meal. we're going to give you the ingredients in the data sheets. The detachments are going to be how you make different meals out of those ingredients. So that will be fascinating. The other thing you guys said on the show on Sunday that I want to emphasize for people who didn't get a chance to listen to it was you, Colin, talked about how you chatted with a bunch of the GW judges, all of whom said that the core rules of 10th are great and the problems are in the data sheets of the indices. And I think that's accurate. And as we add on and start getting codices as opposed to indices, I think the game is going to be great. I'm really looking forward to that. Now to Paul.
All right. Paul has a question. He says, what do you, Colin and Billy, that's us, want to see from live questions and comments? What do you think, Billy?
Just have a conversation with us. Like if we say something interesting, riff back at it. If there's an obvious question that like springs from the conversation we're having, put it in there. Sincerely, to the extent that we can have, a third voice in here, and is the voice of the people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. Which, Colin, there's a West Wing opportunity in there.
I didn't hear what you said. I couldn't understand what you said.
Oh, Vox Populi, Vox Dei. The voice of the people is the voice of dog.
Okay. I don't know.
No, voice of God. Okay. Joey Lucas to Josh Lyman. Okay. Season 2.
Fair enough. Let's go to what's winning.
What's winning?
I am a big West Wing fan, but that doesn't mean I remember every line from every episode. Okay, so the things that are winning are still winning, and the win percentages kind of show that. We just talked about the fact that the game has outliers. We're going to talk about who those outliers are. There are people in the top finishes that are not playing this we would consider outliers. So, the general still matters.
Yep.
For those who are wondering. There's some listing here where we have to presume, based on what we know, that the person playing that list was a Grandmaster Ninja at 40K. So we're going to dive in, and we're going to start off by talking about the Lone Star Open, which, of course, was the weekend after Tacoma. So, like this big start, GW does their big tournament, and then Frontline immediately does their big tournament. I was surprised at how many people went to both.
Yeah.
Like, people that don't live in either place, like Ben Jurek, who we're about to talk about, flew to both of these things. I don't think he could drive to either of them. So like some people did some back-to-back hardcore stuff here. And it was a 214 player tournament, I presume with a Frontline terrain. Did they go back to player placed, Billy?
Someone correct me in here. I think what they did is they did the GW terrain, but with they added keywords and they had a mild fix to towering in terms of some of the terrain blocked regardless of what true line of sight was.
Yeah, unless you tow in.
Yeah, there was something about it, yes. And I believe that's Noah in there saying yes to my comment about terrain. No, it was player placed.
Okay. That's important to know.
Yeah.
Because we are playing two different games now. Player placed and the GW train are very different from each other. So we are playing, so that's two different games, which is unfortunate, but it is the way of things. And I believe it will continue to be the way of things, because I do not think that Frontline will replace all their terrain with the GW train. I don't see that happening.
All they have to do is buy a bunch of acrylic sheets, and it's really not that expensive, but that's a whole other...
I don't think they're going to do it. I'm sorry.
That's fair. I think I would argue that in 9th, GW terrain was the outlier and FLG was the standard, at least where I played. I think that's flipping on its head going forward.
Yeah, I think that, for one, I think GW is doing, with no offense to our wonderful friends at Frontline, I think GW is doing a better job of running events. They got a lot more people, and it was a very well-run event. And everyone I've talked to says that GW events are really, really well run. The thing that GW does that someone spoke about, that I think, Billy, maybe you spoke about it, that I hadn't considered, is that GW is getting attention from people that Frontline's tournaments don't get. There were a bunch of local people that play 40K that were at Tacoma that I had never seen at a tournament before. They're able to get more of the hobbyist and more of the enthusiastic middle to lower tier competitively crowd to come. And that's a big deal because the more people you get, the more of a kind of spectacle it is and the more chance you have for getting people. So I think that's something that GW is doing that's better. Frontline has their own charms, of course, as well. But there's a difference there. And I think that as GW gets more and more excited about running tournaments, I think that Frontline's tournaments will get less and less attention. I would wonder, without any inside knowledge about it, if those two things are going to merge.
It's been hypothesized by people who have as little information as the two of us for a very long time. It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. So Noah says, all ruins blocked all lines and were infinitely tall. However, that meant towering models could also hide.
If towering models can hide and you can hide from towering models, then I'm fine with that.
I agree. Okay, so the winner of the 214-player Lone Star Open was, in fact, Ben Jurek, who I think got 8th or so at Tacoma. He was playing Eldari, as he's been doing. He won at a tournament 2 weekends ago with Eldari, and he and his wife went. And then he got 8th at Tacoma, and now he went and won here. Amusingly, his list for this event, the top of it says Tacoma. So I don't think this list has changed. But it's an Autarch, a Death Jester, a Farseer Skyrunner, and the Incarn. He doesn't even have the -1 to wound guy to give you an idea of how often you strat reserve the Wraith Knight. 3 Fire Prisms, 1 Night Spinner, 1 unit of Shadow Specters, 2 Warwalkers, a Warp Spider, and a Wraith Knight. Like I said before, this is all the things that shoot well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on. Second place.
Can we pause just for 1 second? The Incarn.
Yes.
Have you played with it yet?
No, I've played against it a couple times, and I certainly understand what people are doing with it. I think that so the Incarn can teleport to wherever someone has died, and they've removed a lot of the movement after redeploy rules. So like there's silly things like gargoyles for Tyranids get to move 6 inches after they shoot. Well, they deep strike. So you can deep strike in 9 inches away, shoot something, and then move 6 and get onto an objective that has people already on it.
Right.
Like they have this sort of jank in the game now. And the Incarn does that. It can teleport, and then it could heroic intervene if there was a charge. It could charge. It could do those things. So what happens is the Eldar player uses a ridiculous amount of guns to kill a thing that's deep in your castle or whatever, moves the Incarn there, and then charges you, and now you have an Incarn in your backfield killing things. The Incarn then can die, right? But the Incarn is incredibly durable, so if it takes your opponent their entire turn to deal with the Incarn, then that's great because the rest of you shooting is still alive. I think that the Incarn is actually a really powerful piece. My issue with the Incarn is that there are lots of situations where it will underperform in combat, and you won't really have a say about that. Because it doesn't ignore invuls anymore and it doesn't have a ton of attacks, if something has an invul, like Custodes, then it really is going to have a hard time and it's going to be erratic. The additional concern I have about the Incarn is situations like Custodes where they can just give their big unit fight first.
Yeah, they would chop it to little gribbly bits.
So I think that the Incarn is really dope, and I understand why it's in lists that are winning, because I think, especially with a Night Spinner in the list, where you can be like, oh, you've got 5 Rangers on your home objective. Blam! Oh, they died? Well, now the Incarn's standing on your home objective. Like, there's a lot of stuff like that that's really, really cool.
Okay, so like what the most annoying, janky, occasionally killy, depending on matchup distraction Karn effects ever?
Yeah, I mean, except that it murders things. Like, it's not bad at all, and its sweep is really good, and its flamer is good. Like the Incarn's a solid model. I would not fault anyone for taking it. Mm-hmm. I don't tend to play with it, but I kind of want to, just because I want to do something that's not shooting. Okay, let's move on.
Cool.
Second place was actually Tau. Will Abelez is won a lot of things in his career.
Yeah,
and he certainly loves his Tau. So I don't know a lot about Tau in 10th edition. I've been told that they are in fact not good, but this is in fact second place. So, yeah. He's got a Cadre Fireblade. He's got Commander Shadowsun, a Firesight team, and a Long Strike. Those are his HQs. Then he's got 2 10-man, or he's got 1 Breacher team and then 1 Strike team. A Devilfish that I would imagine one of those teams is inside of. 1 big unit of Broadsides, a Ghost Keel, a unit of Kroot, a unit of Kroot Riders, 2 Piranhas, a Riptide with the Ion Accelerator. Okay, yeah. And then a unit of Stealth Battlesuits, a Bomber, and something called Tetras, which he gets 2 of for 80 points. So this list must have shot people, and it must have shot people really well, because mostly people are telling me that they believe Tau are in the not functional category of lists. But this is someone who has who has a tradition of doing well playing Tau, and he did well. So there you have it. Did you just laugh at me, Billy?
I'm gonna say that player skill had a lot to do with this, because there's efficient shooting in here. There is good mission playing tools. That all of them have gills instead of pointy ears. The pointy-eared version is probably better, but the player is, I think the player is the distinguishing factor in this list.
Okay, and that probably is the case. Third place was Eric Tat with Genestealer Cult, who I still believe are the best army in the game. Genestealer Cult lists, I don't know how you guys exactly want me to go through these. They're all basically the same. His big difference is that he only has 1 Saboteur, which I think is insane. The Saboteur for 55 points is like maybe the most broken character in the game. But whatever. The Saboteur blows you up when you get near them. They have Lone Operator. They have an indirect fire gun. They have a demo charge when you get close. Like, for 55 points, they're just insane. They null deploy. They have infiltrated, in other words. Anywho, so this list is a little bit different because he took 3 Primus. Usually you see 2. 3 Primus means that 3 of his units are getting full rerolls to hit. That's certainly cool. He only has 1 unit of the bomb guys, which I think is a fine decision depending on what you're trying to do. And then he's got 5 units of 20 neophytes. So usually you see 80 neophytes and then more bomb guys. Then Aberrants and 3 Ridge Runners. Pretty standard stuff. But Genestealer Cult is not very easy to play, just extremely powerful. So congrats to Eric Tat, who I'm sure played them extremely, extremely well.
Yeah, one thing that I just saw from GSC lists, and maybe you'll disprove that by going through some of your lists, is that they're going away from the bikes that can come forward and do just an obnoxious amount of mortal wounds. Do you have thoughts on that particular choice?
I personally don't think they're that good. I think that you're putting a lot of effort into a cute mechanic that you just don't need because of how good the shooting is.
That's fair. It was Tyler Bortel, and that does sound like something he would do, something that's cute. But
yeah, but he's not doing it anymore. I think he's removed that from his list.
Yeah,
he didn't have that. I know he didn't have that at Tacoma.
Yeah, if even Tyler is taking out that unit out, I think that's what you need to know.
So 4th place is a guy named Robert Moreland, and he had Guard, continuing to be very interested in how this tournament ended up, because again, some of the armies that people think are bad. Now, I think Guard are solidly upper middle tier. I think that Guard are, if you're doing S, A, B, C, I think they're AA minus. I don't think Guard are bad at all because they also have efficient shooting, which is just good. Now, one of the things I love about this guy's list is he starts off with the Gaunt's Ghost unit. I can't tell you if that unit is good or not because there's so many rules on that unit that I don't even know what to think. But it's 115 points and you get a lot of rules and a lot of guns. Then you've got Solar, you've got a platoon command squad, you've got an Engiseer and Ursula. Then he took 2 units of Cadians, 1 unit of Death Corps, 2 Chimeras, which is really, really interesting. I love that in the current meta. I love the idea that some of these shooty guys were driving around in their Chimeras. He then took a Bane Sword, which is, something that really has words to say with Knights. Then 1 unit of Mortars, 2 Hellhounds, 2 Rapier Laser Batteries, which you never see, a Scout Sentinel, 1 unit of Temessus Scions, and finally a Calidus Assassin, who like I talked about last week, redeploys, which is really dope for actions.
Yeah. No, one of the things that just Imperium writ large, you're going to see a lot of Arcalidus assassins, and in more elite armies, Guard don't necessarily need this, but the Exaction Squad, I think we talked about that last week, but for people who missed it, those two pieces are showing up in a lot of Imperialists and just really add some great utility for very reasonable costs.
Yep. Okay, so just some shout outs here. Robert Hawkins also went 5-1 with Genestealer Colt. He got 5th place. The amazing and wonderful human that is on the Best Overall show for our network, Noah Badome, took his knights. His scores are hilarious because they go 100, 100, 88, 100, 98, 48. Like murder, 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 murder. Oops. So good job, Noah, on going 5-1. Russell Tassin with Black Legion went 5-1. Robin Roberts with GSC went 5-1. Here's another GSC that went 5-1. Cliff Russell. And then finally, Junior Aflahi. I've never known if I'm saying that correctly. Also went 5-1 with Knights, 5-1 Chaos Space Marines, 5-1 World Eaters, 5-1 Chaos Space Marines. This is what happens when you have a lot of people at a tournament with only 6 rounds. So there's lots more 5-1s there. Okay, next tournament is the Palm. Sorry,
really quick, Noah just mentioned this. LSO was the military challenge, and the Marines won. So Semper Fi.
Wow. You need me on that wall, Noah. Okay. So this is interesting because this tournament was 111 players in Palm Springs. Do you know anything about this tournament being near it?
Well, I'm not actually near it. I'm about 6 hours away from it.
No, near it. Sorry, go ahead. I was just being difficult. Please continue.
Okay. I just know that being in Palm Springs, given the heat wave that is currently gripping the world, sounds like an interesting choice. I would imagine it was a Xenos petting zoo, which is the big team down around that area. I would imagine they were well represented. Apparently a bunch of very good players, but no, I'm not particularly familiar with the Southern California meta.
Fair enough. Well, Joel Wilson won this event. Mm-hmm. And I would like to give Joel the Massive Brass Balls Award for the weekend. I am blown away that this list is what he won with. Joel must be just an incredible player. I understand why this list is good-ish. So he brought Tyranids, and his list is called Gaunt Carpet. So his HQs are Death Leaper, the Tyrant on Foot, and the Neuro Tyrant. The Tyrant on Foot is really interesting. It's really great. It's basically auto-include, so there's nothing surprising there. The Neuro Tyrant is really inexpensive for what it is, so that's cool. And then he's got 1 unit of 20 Hormagaunts, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units of 20 Termagants. Okay? Then he's got 2 Biovores. Now, Biovores are really strong right now because Spore Mines count for missions.
Yeah.
They should not. I presume that's something that will get changed in the FAQ because that's wildly dumb. Like, oh, I've got Engage on all fronts. Spore Mine in your back corner for the win. Like, dumb.
Well, and then the Spore Mine does an action.
Exactly. Lictor, Maliceptor. This is the second time we've seen Maliceptors in well-performing Tyranids lists, so I'm probably wrong about them. Then a big unit of Neurogaunts, probably with the Neurotyrant. And then 2 units of Venomthropes, because he's got all these guys who need to be -1 to hit. And a unit of 3 Zonethropes. This list has no ability to kill people. Like, it will kill some people. The Maliceptors will do damage and everything, but this army is going to grab the table and play the mission. That's what it's going to do. And I'm not amazed that this list did well. I'm amazed that Joel won the whole event with it. 186, 96, 93, 93, 100.
Yeah.
Really, like, he got a bunch of 100s. Like, this is changing my view of 10th edition. That's how much I'm taken back by this list. Okay. Let's see. I asked my Tyranid friends about it this morning. No comments yet. Okay. And then the next player at this tournament's name is Alex Spathopoulos. And he brought Eldari, and the top of his list says broken. It says busted. Autarch Death Jester, Farseer on foot, Illic, 3 Fire Prisms, 1 unit of Rangers, a unit of Shadow Specters, 1 D Cannon, a unit of Swooping Hawks, 2 Void Weavers, which are my current hotness. I can't believe how good they are for 100 points. They shoot really well and are really fast for 100 points. 2 Vipers, 3 Warwalkers, and 3 units of Warp Spiders. If I am tempted to play 15 Warp Spiders. I think the Warp Spiders are absolutely incredible in the current game. Just so fast. Third place is Jake Jasonsky, I think.
Jasianowski.
Sorry, Jeff.
Sorry, Jeff.
And Jeff had Necrons, Catan of the Nightbringer, as well as Transcendent Catan, so about 600 points of Catans, which is cool. Overlord, my understanding is that they're very hard to kill, or at least the Transcendent is. Overlord, Plasmamancer, Technomancer, 10 Immortals, which is something that you certainly haven't seen on the table in a while. A Reanimator, because of course. 2 units of Scarabs, 2 units of Crypto Thralls, I hate those jerks. 5 Death Marks, 2 Doomsday Arcs, 2 units of 5 Flayed Ones, a Heavy Destroyer, and 10 Lich Guard. This is an army that holds the table while killing you. That's what that does. 4th place was Grant Kaufman with Chaos Demons. Thank you, Grant, for having a last name I've seen before. Be'lakor, Great Unclean One, Lord of Change, Shalaxi, the Changeling. Then 4x3 Nurglings, a unit of Plague Bearers, and then 3 units of Flamers. Looks like 3/3/6, and a unit of Fleshhounds. So basically what demons are doing right now is taking a lot of big demons. He leaned in a little bit more to the I also have stuff that does things, and I think that's cool. Other people are taking more Lords of Change than that. So if you're someone who's into buying and painting through Lords of Change, that there is a list for you. 5th place, GSC, Wyatt, Smith, Swift, Ramirez. 7th place, Chaos Space Marines from Arthur 2. 8th place, Mark Merrill with... Mark Merrill? Isn't that the guy from Riot? Or is that a different person? I don't know.
No idea.
Mike McTire with Blood Angels. And Luke Elhart at Tyranids in 10th place. I'm just going to see if Luke's list is similar to the list that won. No, not at all. This is more of a Monster Mash list with a lot of zone throws. Okay. So that's what we can learn from the Palm Springs Open. We have 2 tournaments left and 11 minutes, more time than I normally give Billy. I am going to have to drop 3 minutes before the hour, so let's call it 8 minutes.
Okay. I have 2 events. I listed 12 armies on my events. Of those, 8 are Eldari. I mostly wanted to talk about these 2 just because of the faction representation. The Kraken GT 2023 in Auckland, New Zealand. The top 6 were Eldari, 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 GSC, Eldari. The lists are, there's at least some stuff in it that is worth learning. The main thing is 10 Wraithguard in all of them. Let me just go through the names because the lists are actually very, very similar. Sean Sullivan took 1st place, Sterling Arnett 2nd, Lewis Thompson Greg 3rd, and I apologize to you, Edgar, but your first name is Ngaire, Ngaire. Ngaire Edgar Wilson, whose list was apparently hidden for WTC, so go find out there. The 1st and 3rd lists were actually Inari lists, which is something that I know Colin and I are at least looking hard at. Basically, you take Yvraine as your warlord, and then you can pretty much take the entire Dark Eldar army and put it into Eldari.
Well, there's rules about what you can take, but yes.
But it's way more permissive than it used to be. Just a lot of things you couldn't take before you can now. That said, what you're going to take are probably Ravagers and Scourges. Because
maybe Scourges. For sure, Ravagers. The whole point is getting Ravagers into the list because at 95 points, Ravagers are incredibly good. They're fast. They are durable enough at 95 points when you consider that that's the same price as a effing Warwalker. They have 3 Dark Lances. You can put Disintegrators on them, but I don't know that you will. And the fact that once they have 3 Dark Lances on them, they then get a reroll to hit and a reroll to wound on those 3 shots is incredibly good. So basically, that's the whole point here. The opposite side of that is if you don't have the Way Leaper, you're not getting the free CP every turn. I don't love that. And additionally, you're basically taking 100 and something point character, maybe she's just 100, as a tax to get 3 undercosted tanks in. I think that's good, but I don't think that it is I don't think that it is obvious. I don't think it's auto. It's just good. It's just the way you can play the army.
Yeah. And this is my broader thought and concern about how they're going to quote unquote fix Eldar, is that, this, while there are certainly fire prisms and night spinners and warp spiders in this army, a lot of the damage is different than some of the other Eldar armies that we're seeing. So the breadth of efficient shooting in the Codex is wide. And that's the thing I think you can learn from a lot of these. There's some codices have, these are the 8 units that are efficient enough for me to bring. What can I do with it? Eldar have more than that, and I'm very curious to see how they end up being balanced. But that's broadly what we can take from Auckland. Good job, Kiwis. That's just a fun spread of, well, not spread, a fun non-spread of factions. And then we have the Battle for Middle Wisco 40K in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. This one, it was not only Eldar, although 3 of the top 6 were. First place was Eric Forsman, playing GSC, redacted for Team USA. We'll find out in a couple of weeks.
I think he's literally on the travel team. I think he's literally going. So
we'll
I actually haven't met Eric, but I know that Tyler Bortel says that Eric is a phenomenal GSC player. So I'm excited to see I'm excited to see that he got a chance to go wreck some people with the wildly broken Jeep Stilical.
Yeah. Second place, Matthew Mansour with Chaos Space Marines, who I actually think, if you take the outliers off, are one of the best remaining armies out there. Marks are a ridiculously powerful mechanic. They're just sort of held in check by the fact that I think the real S tier curbs them. Matthew did a fun thing. The Dark Commune and Accursed Cultists is actually a fairly efficient unit of little gribbly bits. But Abaddon, Dark Commune, 30 cultists, 16 accursed cultists, 10 Terminators to bodyguard Abaddon, 5 Chosen of Forge Fiends, and Colin's favorite unit in the Chaos Space Marine line, 2 units of 4 Obliterators. Obliterators are good, actually unironically good now. And I think
unless you know how to screen at 24 inches.
They can shoot indirect, and so you have to completely screen out 24 total inches, which is
I know. I've played against them.
Okay.
I'm still not impressed, but I understand they're not terrible anymore. I understand that. I still think that they're something that is really good against 2/3 of the field. That's what I think about them.
That might be true, but also that's sort of the metric that we should be aiming at for what's good, as opposed to this one thing is good against the entire field. Yeah. Tyler Johnson took 3rd place with Eldari. He did the same thing that everyone else is doing. To be fair, no Wraith Knight, 10 Wraith Guard. That was the way he did it. And then 4th place, Nasty Girl. I don't know who Nasty Girl is. But they brought 10 Wraith Guard and a Wraith Knight in their Eldari list.
Okay.
So Eldari, quite good at the moment.
Who knew?
Yeah, everyone.
Yeah, turns out. Well, guys, that was a fun week. We've got some great tournament results. I'm sure we've got some good tournaments this weekend as well. But I'm optimistic that in about 4 minutes or maybe 64 minutes, we're going to see a fact that's going to clarify some rules. That's what they did say it would happen in July. We do only have a certain number of July days left. So we should have that to talk about for next week. For This Week in 40K, he's Billy, and I'm Colin because someone has to be. And we'll see you all next week. Please join us live if you can. Mm-hmm. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.